Our climate is warming.
So I would love to propose a different direction.
So our theme is climate crisis meets extinction event, but in a fun way.
Okay.
O melhor tomate que eu já comi é o da terra onde eu nasci. Ele é dourado.
Moi, si je suis élu, c'est que chacun ait le choix de pouvoir manger sainement et gratuitement des produits bio en circuit court.
We're raising money to help climate refugees learn improv. Yes, and the ocean's dying.
So fresh water to 5 times as many Colombians.
Wow, that is fantastic.
We only have one Earth. We should be giving it 100%.
You know what this is?
It sucks carbon dioxide from the air.
100,000 of these would be the equivalent of planting 1 trillion trees.
900 billion.
Roughly 1 trillion trees.
I'm all prepared to persuade you to create a fully green roof.
Zero carbon emissions, radically efficient.
It's an oil-derived biopolymer.
How much of this is potato starch?
It's about 65%.
You guys really have solved a massive problem.
I was thinking about keeping it, earthy, organic.
Yes, and biodynamic.
I got vegan.
Oh my gosh, lovely.
That's less meat, more legumes. Reckon you can do it?
Yes.
Michael's a 31-year-old farmer of New Orleans. Helping to end hunger, yeah.
What a lovely breakfast.
Where there is heroism, there will always be hope.
Remember Dover Cliffs guy from the video? Fake accent? Except it's real, and he's saving the environment, and he loves his mother, and he's funny.
The outside temperature is climbing at an alarming rate.
Climate change is a hoax!
This is the future? It could be if everyone takes care of the planet.
The organization lobbies for environmental justice globally.
Why be mean when you could be green?
We are talking about upcycled fashion. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Yes!
We are go for launch.
Good work.
Hey, give it up for Netflix sustainability stories. And once again, give it up. Hear how loud that was, and then triple it for the Hollywood Climate Summit. Day 3. Yes, that's Day 3 energy. This is the second panel. We're settling into the heart of the curve of Day 3. We're really nailing it here, folks. Did everyone go get some food out there? Yeah, okay, I heard a couple woos. Is anyone, part of this whole thing, spoiler alert, is about networking and meeting new people. Did anyone meet anybody new? Okay, I heard a woo. Now from the woos, who's got the bravery to introduce a person that they just met? This is a weird ask because that person doesn't know that you're going to do this, and it's kind of rolling the dice. I see a hand over there. Okay, hand. Just shout it out.
This is Jim Greenbaum.
Give it up for Jim Greenbaum. That's a leader, folks. Jim Greenbaum, I don't know about your leadership, but whoever shouted out Jim Greenbaum, that person is a leader. Congrats. And we're going to talk a little bit about leaders on screen for this next panel. What a segue. This guy's a pro. How does he stick the landings like this? Anyway, we're going straight to the top. My favorite depiction of leaders in film, of course. Leaders on the silver screen. I forgot to fade that audio out. So if somebody back there is capable of fading it out. Nope, I guess not. That's fading it up. Screw it. Okay. Leaders on the silver screen. Of course, we're talking about the president in movies or TV shows. Now, I want you all to really lock in. I see a couple of you on your cell phones. That's fine, That's cool. Those of you who are not, think in your hearts. Who is the president that you resonate most with in television or film? And there's only one correct choice. I think we're all thinking it, obviously. Really think, who's that president that you really think about? And I think we're all thinking the same thing. George Clooney in the movie Spy Kids 3D: Game Over from 2003. What's up? Thank you. Thank you very much. One little thing I know about this movie, I've never seen it, but I know George Clooney was in roughly 5 minutes of this movie. He is wearing a black suit. He couldn't be bothered to put a blue suit on like a president from a movie. He ruffled his hair. He looks like he's on a Zoom call. Obviously, that's not the president in all of our hearts. The president, of course, is a two-way tie between, oh man, spoiler alert, a two-way tie between President Bartlett and whatever Bill Pullman's character was from Independence Day. Those are the presidents we think about when we think about cinema. Slicked back hair, blown back. You know, these are like handsome versions of the presidents that we've had since the founding of the country. A little tired of iconography, if you ask me. I will say this is like fan fiction for presidents. This is like if Democrats had a MAGA president that they would storm the Capitol for, it's these guys. That's how I envision these guys. Then we've kind of evolved in our iconography to Meryl Streep. No notes. Beautiful. I paid for the Getty subscription to get the high-res photograph of this. That was a $14 purchase. That's not going in my invoice because that's how much I love the look of Meryl Streep in this movie. Didn't care for the politics too much of this movie, but Meryl Streep was great. And then finally, an honorable mention, television or movie presidents. We got Danny Glover in the movie 2012. That was released in the year 2009. If they had just waited 3 more years, they probably could have figured out if the movie was right or not. But, you know, they did. And again, I didn't buy the stock footage for this one. I think you'll notice that was a $14 that I wasn't going to spend. And I'm sorry. But I did notice that this is made by a man named Roland Emmerich, who is also the director of such movies as Independence Day, where the Earth is mostly destroyed by aliens, The Day After Tomorrow, where the Earth is mostly destroyed by climate change, Independence Day Resurgence, where the Earth they come back to finish the job, and of course Moonfall, where the moon comes back to finish the job. In conclusion, this man hates the planet Earth, okay? I think I speak for all of us when I say it's time for some new leaders on the silver screen, new versions of leaders, and that's why I'd like to please announce, coming to the stage, Neme Ndolo, straight out of Bushwick, to introduce this next panel. Give it up big for Neme! She's a filmmaker and an influencer, and she lives in New York, so that's 10 points for her.
Can I? Oh, I can speak. Oh, wow. Thank you. That was absolutely insane. Hi, you all. How is everyone feeling today? I was gonna be like, oh my God, give me like more energy, but that was honestly enough. So thank you. That was great. I feel like y'all are energized off of the vegan food you had downstairs. Yeah? Okay, I'm jealous. Nice. Let's absolutely get started. Again, that was a fantastic segue on our host's part. We are talking about media's role in uplifting leaders we need. Almost like a teleprompter. Nice. So first off, let me preface this by saying, for me, this is personally Hell Week. So I will be reading the questions verbatim. Let's roll with it. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here and speaking with all of you today. Sincerely, I actually deadass am. Like, seriously, just don't take this as a serious thing. Today's panel is about how we see leadership embodied on screen in our characters and storylines. Especially when we are thinking about climate, we know that we need many more people to see themselves as leaders. People that exemplify community service, and self-determination. Leaders like the teachers in Abbott Elementary, the city officials of Parks and Rec. How do we represent more leaders like that on screen, and how do we have those leaders uphold climate values? We're here today to talk with the leaders themselves. Would you all mind introducing yourselves? Okay, I don't need them for that. Introduce yourselves, let's go.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tiana. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a local environmental justice activist in South Los Angeles. I actually am a Southern girl, which I always say on every stage that I'm ever on. Oh, really? Yeah. Love it. Exactly. That's why I say it, because we have these moments.
Yeah, we do.
So I grew up, my family's from Charleston, South Carolina, and if you are from the South, especially Charleston, South Carolina, you grow up with a lot of examples of this country's legacy of slavery, whether it's old Confederate flags or old slave markets or statues. And you kind of start to think that this is racism in America. Well, when I started doing environmental work, I kind of entered it into the way that a lot of people enter it, charismatic megafauna, nature that's far away, not in our urban environments. And I started to question, like, why are we talking about environmentalism as this thing that's so distant from where people are? Why are we talking about it as disconnected from public health? And you start to, when you live in South LA, when you live in certain communities, you start to ask questions. Why does that community have trees and mine doesn't? Why is the highway in my neighborhood and not in their neighborhood? Why is the oil drill in South Los Angeles the largest urban oil field in the country, by the way, in South Los Angeles, and not in another neighborhood? And you start to see that racism in America is the things that I mentioned and the things that I noticed growing up, but it's also all of these things. It's environmental racism. And so my job is as an environmental justice program manager at a local nonprofit called Black Women for Wellness, and we approach climate change work, climate justice, environmental justice work through actually a reproductive justice lens. So that's thinking about all of the rights and human rights that people have and deserve through a reproductive justice framework, and we address the ways in which Black women, girls, femmes, and gender-expansive peoples are overexposed and underprotected from toxic chemicals in their built environment, so where they live and sleep and play and pray. And also in personal care products, which is its own framework called the environmental injustice of beauty. But that is to say that I am a Southern girl on a mission to bring about environmental justice, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thanks to May. I'm Heather Hargreaves. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Campaigns at Climate Power. Climate Power is a strategic communications firm that focuses on the intersection of climate and politics, and we're really about trying to make sure that climate change and addressing climate change is a politically winning issue. And I'm a Southern girl too, but from Southern California. I live in DC now, but I'm super happy to be back in Southern California to be with you today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sandra Perez-Gonzalez. I'm the Senior Vice President for Community and Civic Engagement with the League of Conservation Voters. The work of the League of Conservation Voters is to elect and hold accountable people who will fight for climate justice and hold up democracy. I actually came to the League of Conservation Voters through my democracy work. I also am a Southern California girl, but I come from the Inland Empire. And I grew up in San Bernardino. If you guys understand San Bernardino, it's one of the most poor parts of the state, and it's also one of the poorest parts of the country. And like those kind of frontline communities, it also suffers from severe effects of pollution and inequity and the health consequences of those inequities. Growing up as the daughter of immigrants as well, my dad was a jardinero. For those of you who speak Spanish in the audience, y'all know that's a gardener, the gentleman who mows your lawn. My dad is still working. He's 77. He has no insurance. He has no retirement. He's lost both of his ears and most of his scalp to skin cancer. Those are the intersections with climate, right, and climate change that I think people don't think about. And in my work, where I actually was doing work around voter registration, get out the vote, and pulling the levers of power to engage people in democracy, when LCV started doing work on democracy about 10 years ago, I was really intrigued. I thought of myself, and I still think of myself as a little E environmentalist, right? I recycle, I wear vintage, I compost. And I really thought, what can I contribute to the environmental movement? It's really wonky. I don't know what carbon offsets are. But when they started to connect the dots between the fact that the people who are most locked out of the democratic process are also the people who are also locked out of environmental justice, then I knew I had a place in the movement. And I'm happy to be with you guys here tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Candace McFarlane. I am the Chief Creative Officer at Cinereach. We are a story incubator and production company, but most importantly, we're looking to build new ways of story development, pre-production, production, and so on, that's responsive to the moment. So for us, that includes starting everything from a narrative research perspective, where we're centering people doing the actual work as our inputs for the stories that we want to tell, the mediums they need to be told in, and with whom they should be told. So we're really excited to be here, and I would just put in a little plug that one thing we're really proud of is tomorrow night's game jam where you will see some of the results of that work in terms of how we look to include narrative research in creative works. So you see some prototypes of video games tomorrow that will show you how we do that and how it manifests in games that you can play. And I'm happy to be here too. And I'm from Harlem. I'm not from the South.
Wonderful to meet you all, and also thank you all for being here. I nearly said on this Friday afternoon, but it's not Friday yet? Oh, well, okay, so this Thursday afternoon, great to have you all here. So again, our host, Rolly, was saying earlier, he was talking about presidential iconography. Whenever people think of what a leader looks like, phenotypically, certain images tend to come to mind, certain qualities tend to come to mind. Stepping away from the image of that, what qualities probably come to mind whenever you think of a leader? Could we start with Candace?
On screen?
Yeah.
Well, we actually did a lot of research around this. So the vast majority of the time, a leader is a white male over the age of 65. And when it comes to civic leader, more often than not, they are either represented as corrupt or ignorant. And that's pretty much the spectrum of what we see on screen.
Next. Yeah, I think this is one that that I struggled with. I talked to my team about it before we got here, because my first thought went to the same thing. When I think of leaders and I think of people of color, because that's my job, to bring in underserved communities, young people, LGBTQ, women, they're not shown up in the media. Often they're either victims who are corrupt. They might be the mistress. The one that I was recently struck with was a sidekick, and I do think that's a place where we show up more, less as a leader, but mostly as a sidekick, was Stewie in Succession, a Persian gentleman who was influential, but wasn't the one, like a big power player, right? And I thought, well, that's interesting. We're kind of growing, but we're adjacent. We're not the center of the story. I think that that's probably a space where we do need to normalize and socialize that for our community, because often the way that we are shown in community through leaders, and which our leadership roles are as teachers, policemen, the military, which is all great, specifically for communities that are locked out economically and socially. It's a pathway to the middle class, super awesome. But in places like the boardroom or as elected officials, we're still not there.
Yeah, I actually thought about this question more as what I actually look for and want to see in leaders, both in day-to-day life and on screen. And I really think about it as like two main qualities, and Climate Power does a lot of research as well on slightly different paths. But I think that the two most important qualities are really trustworthiness and being solutions oriented. Too many of our leaders are just talking about the challenges and the problems that we're facing, especially around the climate crisis. But we need leaders that are actually talking about how we address the problems. And I think that that is really what will resonate more with people. And we have seen leaders like that. And those are the people that are actually then taking action and getting done what we need to get done. And again, trustworthiness, authenticity feels like a cliche, but it is so important. And I think more and more when we're bombarded by so much information with social media and whatnot, people want to listen to people that they trust. And that can come across in different ways. I think feeling like somebody is just being truthful and authentic in the way that they're communicating, but also like what their background is and where their like lived experience is in terms of like talking about that story. I think it really adds to like the trustworthiness of their leadership.
Yeah, seconds to so many things. And I also took the question in a similar vein. And for me, my day-to-day work, I spend the majority of my time working in coalitions, working with community leaders, working in groups of people to drive change. But the representation we often see on TV is exactly what we saw, one person, an individual hero, the hero's journey. But again, how advocacy works, especially environmental justice advocacy, and even to what you shared, that's not how it works. An example is we actually just had a big win today in one of the campaigns. Big Oil has been spending a lot of money trying to deceive voters into overturning this protective law that would add a 3,200-foot buffer between people and oil drilling. The law passed in 2022. They spent over $60 million getting it overturned, lying to voters. And we found out today that because of community power, because of environmental justice advocacy across the state, from Kern County, here, Wilmington, up in the Bay, they withdrew the referendum, so it's not going to be on the ballot in November.
Personal thanks for that. Please continue.
It's exciting, but there was no one person who did that. There was no one image that I can see, but I can see the groups of people. There's so many faces that go through my mind when I think about all of the work that went into making that happen. And I don't see media doing a great job of showing what it actually is to organize and to bring people together all of the time.
That is true. That is true. I do love that we are having this conversation at the epicenter of creation of, well, God, that sounded so egotistical. Sorry. That would be a much better suited sentence in a Catholic church, I guess. No, but at the epicenter of art, you know, we are the people who are driving the narratives, and it is good. I mean, this is, am I gonna put my foot in my mouth right now? It is cool how this group of us kind of deviates from the iconography shown to us earlier. And it's pretty cool to see such people like us driving these conversations. So yeah, no foot in mouth, yay. Okay, I'm gonna return back to teleprompter in a 1940s way, paper. I'd love to start with you, Heather. When we think of a leader, we tend to think of presidents and CEOs. But when it comes to something like climate or other social justice issues, we need leaders at every level, and people can sometimes feel resistant to get engaged in their local governance or advocacy groups with everything going on in their lives. Why do you think that rethinking civic engagement is important, and how can people see the value in being a leader in the context of their own lives?
Yeah, I think that people want to see real people in leadership and showing like how, again, we can actually address climate crisis in real ways. And to me, the most important thing is really to elevate the 3 million people in our country that are actually working in the clean energy industry right now. And I think that that is a great way to get people to actually see in their communities, people that are actually engaging and are doing work to actually reduce carbon, whether or not that's in, you know, manufacturing, you know, EV batteries or home energy efficiency. But like that work is really how we can actually show leadership to the community. You know, we work very closely with a bunch of, you know, clean energy workers across the country, and there's just some great examples like this woman, Telia Almond. She is a Black queer woman who's a master electrician in Philadelphia, and she runs this program called Rosie's Girls, and it is about educating high school women to get into the electrician field, which is booming right now. If you haven't been paying attention, like the more and more we transition to clean energy, there's going to be more and more jobs as an electrician, and she's working, you know, again, to get women, young women into that field. And it's the work of women like her that I think we need to uplift and use in more storytelling to actually show that like these are the types of things you can do to show leadership in your community and actually get more people involved.
It's super. Sorry, ADHD. It's again, it's always super helpful to see real life feedback from different, you know, things like initiatives that we've worked on. I know Climate Power, correct me if I'm wrong, was behind advertising the jobs with the ACC, correct?
Yes.
American, right?
Yeah.
And kind of seeing, you know, people fill those jobs, you know, in clean energy is really motivating.
Yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar, the American Climate Corps just got launched with the federal government. Just got launched, I think this week was where they were just inducting the first class into that work, and it's kind of like an AmeriCorps for climate work. And yeah, I mean, it's really fantastic, and it's giving young people, again, tangible ways to actually take action, and I think that that's the way people feel hope and optimism that we can actually address this issue that we all know is, you know, an existential crisis, and like this is really giving people that tool. So yeah, I agree. That's a great example.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Candace, your company, CineReach, produces research-forward, informed approaches to impact campaigns and storytelling. What drove the decision to shift that model, and how do you see those choices reflecting positively on CineReach, both in your content and as a business?
Well, so many things led to that, but we went through a pretty significant pivot as an organization. So for about 15 years, we made independent films. That's what we did. We did it well, and by the metrics of that industry, we're very successful with the awards and all of those things. And then we realized that we were so focused on social justice and social issues and funding these sorts of films that were really existing in an echo chamber. And something else was happening in the industry where there was a film made, there was a project made, and then there were the culturally proficient people who were then asked, how do we make sure this has impact? How do we make sure it gets to the right people? How do we do this? And you know, as an organization, we said, well, it's way too late to ask those questions, isn't it? Because as any storyteller knows, in the very DNA of what you're making, and the characters, and the world building, and every choice you make, every step of the way you're having impact, and you want to have that information when you're in a development process. So we sort of reversed what many people were doing, including ourselves, to begin our process before we even decide what we're making, literally, not even what medium it's in. We start with mapping the ecosystem of the folks doing that work, of activists, of community organizers, of educators, of academics, of people who are working in these spaces to say, what role can story play in the work that you do? Because that's what we're looking to answer. What aids your work? What challenges your work? So even though it's funny when we look at it, those narratives of leadership make it really difficult for people to do certain work. It makes it really difficult for new sorts of leaders to be elected and trusted because you don't see it on screen. So its system has been really great for us because it's allowed us to open our eyes into what storytelling could be. So as I said earlier, we're in the video game space. We're making a graphic novel. We're working in television. We've had to push beyond independent film to be responsive to what the needs were of the movements and the people we're hoping to support. So in terms of positive, I think that was the question. What's been really positive about it is anytime you make that sort of change, especially when you're considered really successful, you don't know how people are going to respond. It's like, why are you changing? Everything's good? Everybody's happy? And it's been awesome to see how open our collaborators have been to working in this way. It's been awesome to see people from different aspects of an ecosystem understanding what strategy can look like and how we ultimately get that on screen in the most entertaining way. So the openness for collaboration, which I think is just people understanding we're in urgent times, has been extremely encouraging for us as an organization.
Hearing your experience from the front lines is absolutely insane. Again, that's, I'm losing my train of thought and actually really do want to come back to, because I do want to build off some points. But super quickly, going back, something that we don't often think about is that content, and therefore the depiction of leaders in content. I am catching my train of thought in real time. Content, cool. Okay. Really quickly, Candace, can you remind me, about a few minutes ago, you said something about going into video games, doing a graphic novel, is it? Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Okay, good. Adaptability, thank God. Okay, good. Train of thought caught, thank God. Okay, good.
You got it.
It's been a long day, dude. Being adaptable in today's climate where things are changing super quickly in this age of urgency is extremely important. And hearing your accounts from the front lines, seeing how you started off in indie film, and then you're going all the way to an extreme jump of doing video games. I would actually, this isn't on the list, and I think we have time. Could I actually hear a little bit about that process? Because again, like,
Absolutely.
you know, the kind of like, the processes that go into making a film are a lot different than for a video game. And there's, you know, different types of teams and everything, so that pivot is super interesting. Can we just quickly hear about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that became really obvious to us was many artists will come to a meeting saying, I want to make a movie about. But most of the time it's because there's a relative, even though it's difficult, there's a clear pathway with which to do that. So you just want to tell your story. But when you really ask questions about why, what, who, and with whom, it may not be a film at all. You want that story out there in the best possible version for the impact you're looking for the communities you want to engage with. And so for us, we had to ask different questions early on about what. Hi, everybody. I got really into it there. I was answering your question.
And I was enabling.
But what it required of us as an organization, and the way that you all answered the question about leadership, I would say I'm really proud of what we did in this capacity, was remaining curious and open and holding multiple things at the same time. I think that's one of the biggest indicators of leadership, where we do need to satisfy and respect and keep relationship with our artist community that we work so hard to build, while also understanding there are urgent cultural issues at play, while also understanding technology is evolving at a rapid pace, while also. And I think good leadership is reflected in being able to hold all those things and not get frustrated and overwhelmed, but still be able to push through. So in response to your question, we realized, okay, we're being told by a lot of academics, activists, community organizers, and so on, there's a huge opportunity in gaming and then a lot of issues in gaming. Can we show up for that? We then had to reimagine all of our processes, to your point. We had to understand what a game jam was. We had to build, and some of the team is right here in the front that really worked on this. We had to, all these people right here, look, fabulous.
My contacts are messed up today. Hi.
But we had to be open to having a new conversation with our board, reintroducing ourselves as an organization to say, we're doing this because we have to understand production in a new way and be responsive to new creative communities. So it is a major pivot. I say it very lightly, but it was pretty dramatic, and we're still learning, and it's exciting. Thank you for asking that.
Oh yeah, no, seriously, it's always fun to hear people in other parts of the industry talk about how they adapt, especially in the age of technology that we're in. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, now from the question that put my train of thought back on the track, something that we don't often think about is that content, and therefore the depiction of leaders in content, is that those depictions will be available for and influence generations to come. Tiana, you have been a social justice leader since high school. What legacy of leaders do you wish media left for younger generations, and what advice would you give to other young people about embracing leadership in their own communities?
Thank you. I'll start with the second part of the question. So I recently started reading a book by Professor Dr. Ruha Benjamin, and the book is called Imagination. And I love it. It's incredible. She's another book, Race After Technology, which is amazing as well. And she talks about this framework called the New Jim Code to speak to technological advancements. But in the book, she talks about how society codes dreams. It codes which dreams we deem and which imaginations and whose imagination we deem to be worthy. Worthy for the big screen, worthy for funding, worthy for an education. So that could say that buying a $500 million yacht is worthy. Building an amusement park in your backyard is worthy. Affordable healthcare for all, not worthy. Expensive. Getting to live and breathe and exist in a safe and clean environment for yourself and your family, no. So when we think about the faces, again, the images we saw earlier, those are the people who we say their dreams matter, their imagination matters. And when you're somebody who comes from a community that has been harmed, then the view that you have on possibility can sometimes be skewed. I know mine was in many ways, and if I only chose career paths based on what media said was appropriate for me, I would not be doing what I do now. So I think that what the advice that I give for folks is to spend a lot of time in imagination. Before joining a project, before even doing that much work to understand the problem, which is an important part of the work, it's what is the world that you are trying to build? If you had a magic paintbrush and you're painting that world, what does it look like? Doing that with a community of people, doing that with your friends and with your family to start off, and then that's your North Star, that's your guide. And even when society and even when media and even when they say that your dreams are not the ones that we're gonna put on the big screen, I think it's up to you to say, well, okay, well then my dreams are the one I'm gonna put in the real world. My dreams are the one I'm gonna do community organizing around and make a reality. And so then for Hollywood, I think there's a reality of Hollywood is about imagination. Like, it's incredible. I watch movies all the time, and I'm like, how in the world? It's incredible. And so if Hollywood wasn't segregating whose dreams it deemed to be acceptable, then imagine all of the imaginations that it could awaken. So for this first part of your question, I wish that had happened when I was growing up and when I was deciding on what I wanted to do in the future, because I wouldn't say it was, but I would say that we're changing now. And an example I'll give is part of my job is to, like I said, bring community groups together to be part of it. And sometimes we're at city council, sometimes we're at board of supervisors, sometimes we're doing other things. And there's a movie that came out, I think it's called The Best of Enemies, with Taraji Henson. And there's a scene where she's in representing Ann Atwater, an actual activist from North Carolina. And there's a scene where she's at city council holding like a stack of papers from residents. And I've been that person in city council holding a stack of papers. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've never seen that exact depiction on screen. And it was a cool moment. And I was like, imagine if I'd seen that when I was asking questions about the kind of jobs that I was interested in. And so I think imagination is so important in this world, being a vessel for that. And then also seeing some of the changes that are happening now is exciting.
Super exciting. Okay. Yeah. It's super exciting, and representation in media is extremely important. Like you said, it could have altered the course of your life, and imagination is so integral to the human experience, and so is creation of art, not of people. Why shouldn't we take advantage of imagination? Why are we limiting ourselves? Why shouldn't we also take advantage of imagination to help our world, to prevent impending doom? Why the fuck not, right? I think I am missing a sheet, so I will do this. Sandra, I will take this last question. What leaders or communities have you seen depicted in film, TV, and media that you think are aspirational examples and that we need more of?
So clearly I struggled with this question earlier. I still think that this is an area, so I do community organizing. My job is, and one of the projects that I lead at LCV is Chispa, which is identifying communities and helping people identify the levels of power to make change. Those are often, again, frontline communities. So I'll tell a story. We have, Chispa operates in 6 states. 2 of the states that we work in, Arizona and Nevada, run programs called Clean Buses for Healthy Niños. That was an entry point for these communities to start talking about the intersection of how climate injustice is affecting their families, right? So dirty buses, right, with pollutants are giving kids asthma. Kids with asthma can't go to school. Kids with asthma who don't go to school can't read. Kids with asthma who can't go to school and can't read end up on a pipeline to prison, right? So there's a whole connectedness about the injustice and why, to your point, why do some communities get electric buses and some get dirty buses, right? And we were able to help mothers who were connecting the dots on their own, right? My son can't go to school, right? And we piloted this program. It was eventually adopted by the Biden administration. Yes, it's across the country. And we did partner with the Redford Center in 2021 to make a series of films. And look it up. Some great films called Comunidad, Injustice, and how these community leaders have actually done this work on their own. These are moms who are not citizens, may be residents, but they can't vote. Their kids can vote. They still can go to city council and school board meetings and they can still testify. There's a way for them to participate. And I think that's something that I would like to see more represented of, this socializing and normalizing of the ways that you don't have to be the president. You don't have to be, the governor. There's ways for you to participate in government, to advocate and lobby and to be present, and there's tons of those stories out there. So for me, that's who I'd like to see. I think that we always talk about Leslie Knope and Community Parks and Rec. She's someone who socialized and normalized the battle of the little government person who's really rallying first. There's Abbott Elementary, all those schools, again, all of those places where our people show up. And I think those little nuanced demonstrations of power are important, because I do think that when I'm talking to community groups and I'm inspiring, agitating, giving someone a call to action to step up and work, the first thing they say is, they won't let me in. I don't know what they're gonna say, and we need to demystify what that they is. You know, it's scary. Speaking truth to power is scary. And I think that's where media is a great tool in the way that we socialize, normalize what you were talking about jobs is like, again, like I said, always see community on TV, and when I say community, that's code for people of color, the underserved communities, and their teachers, janitors, cops. Super awesome, but how about solar installers, right? Like how about the folks who are policymakers? Do you know what I mean? Like those are, and what about the folks who are implementing IRA, the biggest investment in climate and in our communities? Like, I know it's kind of boring and wonky, but there's ways to talk about that in ways that we can socialize and normalize that. And in that way, inspire, agitate people to be leaders. So that's my call to action for y'all. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And the point you made about having, people, just, everyday people, like a solar panel installer, represented in media. I kind of, when you said that, I was like, oh man, yeah, that is something that I haven't seen before. Why haven't we? Again, you can't build a house, from the top down. Even though, yes, let's not kid ourselves, it is hard to get shit done in America, bureaucracy and all that shit. So yes, in America it is top down. However, we still shouldn't take away from the power that we as individuals do have, especially us here in this industry who are creating these narratives and who are deciding, what images are pushed. And I think that is super important. I think we have 11, oh, nice. God, sorry, for a second I looked and I saw 1 minute and I was like, oh my God. Okay, so actually, never mind, we do have more time. This time I actually want to let's start with Heather. I know, so this is actually for everyone, but I'm just gonna say this and then start with Heather. I know all of you often work at the intersection of climate, media, and civic engagement. As we all know, there is a huge gap in the communication and perspectives around climate around the country. Because climate is so all-encompassing, it is important that everyone feels engaged in the conversation in a way that makes them feel connected to it and understands its impact on their lives and their communities. What or how do you wish leaders communicated differently when it comes to trying to tackle climate in a more inclusive and nuanced way? And Heather.
Thanks, May. I think it's actually less about the messages and more about messenger and the means of conveying that message. We've been talking a lot about messenger up here, and I think that that's really what it comes down to, is that we are not letting, just individual, 65-year-old white men individuals be the only messenger. There needs to be, more than just them, again, clean energy workers like we've been talking about. And I think that that will convey more to real people. I was talking earlier to somebody about the work that the Biden administration is doing and looking at President Biden as a leader. And I think obviously we've had great climate action at the federal level. And I think about it more as like an ensemble cast is what we were talking about. And that it's not just one individual, it is a host of individuals that are actually working together to get these actions done. And we need to talk about it more in that way. The last thing I'll say is that I also think that it is the method of conveying those messages. Like too often people are trying to communicate just through, mass media, and we all know that people are looking at media in such a broad spectrum of ways these days, and we have to be using all of that. Which is, I was talking to Candace earlier, and it was really exciting to hear what they're doing with gaming and, the graphic novel. Like, those are all the types of things we need to be doing, and it's not just one thing, because I get a lot of people ask me about the youth vote, because that's something I work on a lot, is like, how are we going to talk to the young people? And I'm like, it's not just one thing, because they're all like, we're going to solve it all on TikTok, and I'm like, we're not going to solve it on TikTok. We're going to solve it by doing TikTok and like 18 other things. And I really think we have to be, throwing everything at the wall and talking to people in all these different ways in order to actually hit people.
Candace, whenever you're ready.
I think that isolating issues would be something I'd love to stop seeing. The notion that this conversation exists on an island, because I think when we're talking about collective interest and collective investment in these things, that's how you make something somebody else's issue. So I think really the contextual understanding of how we got where we are. We spend a lot of time thinking about what are the core cultural agreements that we've made, what are the value sets that are leading to certain behaviors. So there are so many solutions that exist, particularly for this conversation, but nobody's listening if there's not a fundamental investment in justice across the board, that I actually believe you have the right to live in a healthy environment, that I actually believe you have certain human rights, the right to live the way you want to live, the right for all of us to share space. So there's these, at core, really important value sets that I think just get overlooked, and that's how we get divided, because at core, the hope would be that we can find a way where we all think the other is deserving of human rights, human needs. And when I think about leaders and how they're particularly presented on screen, it's always sort of issue-based. And while it is so important for people to show up in leadership roles in the most entertaining way, addressing issues that are urgent, I think we have to make sure it's within the context, which is what you mentioned early on, racial justice, gender justice, all the things that are incorporated in a given issue just need to be addressed. I think that's the only way everyone sort of sees themselves, and you're not able to separate yourself from any issue because you're involved in all of them.
Such agreement. Such agreement. And I think that is like how it's framed as climate change equals fossil fuel burning is warming our climate. That misses so many people's stories. And if we just see that as the problem, then it also means you have the false solutions. While electric vehicles might be part of the change, the mining of lithium is harming people every single day. The petrochemicals, which are fossil fuel chemicals that are in the batteries, the rubber tires that are creating PM 2.5 pollution in communities that are in highways, that are in communities with highways, which is from redlining and all of these things. So if you are seeing the problem as just 2 + 2 = 4, to your point, then you're missing so many people's stories, and you're also missing people who would be engaged if they saw themselves in those stories. So that's one definite connection, and I agree. Another is a framing that climate change even is a threat that is not yet here. Like using the term threat all the time to me is like there are people who have felt a climate disaster and are on the other side of it and are dealing with the problems of it. And so if we keep framing it as this future threat, this future thing, again, you miss people who have already been harmed, who are being harmed today, who are being harmed every day, who have lost their lives, who have lost family members. And then last is I think that so many times the problem is framed as kind of a consequence of our connectedness. Like we are also connected, and so when you do X thing here, you hurt someone here, and that is true. But I think there's also an opportunity and like a lovingness in that. And one of the reasons that I came to this work, I mentioned how I grew up. There's a lot of different civil rights, human rights avenues that I could have taken and been very happy. Part of why I do environmental justice work is because I really fundamentally see doing this work as one of the best ways that we as human beings can tell people we will never know and never meet that we care about them. Like caring for our earth, caring for each other, addressing climate, addressing environmental racism is one of the ways that we can truly, truly lean into what it means to love each other. And that angle of this work as rooted in love and rooted in care and rooted in kindness is also not necessarily the angle that I see in media enough, and would love to, because I think that would bring people in rather than pushing people out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of those things. I just even think of my own entry point into environmental justice work. I was like, I'm not smart enough to do that, you know? And I think that's the part that like media, again, has a great opportunity in helping to dispel that myth, engaging people, young and old, across multitude of barriers. I love the gaming idea. I just love that so much. Because I think of the way I talk to my kids. And you can't pause video games, Mom, or online games. And so those kind of things that I don't think about, and still just how having these conversations and the tools that we are using and have available to us, for whatever reason, we're not thinking broadly, again, of the varied voices and perspectives and points of view that bring people to think about climate change. Like again, I talk about my dad. My dad helps me think of like, oh, like my dad fled his country because of a drought. Was that climate change? Oh, like, you know, like it took me 20 years to figure that out, you know? And so how we wrestle with immigration and people fleeing real changes to this earth, it's here now and it's gonna get worse. And unless we, again, like I keep saying, respond to that call of action, having the, to borrow from Obama, the audacity to like lean into these things with creative solutions and engagements, I think we're missing huge opportunities. And again, like I said, the content is there. There are people doing this work. We have workers that we work with in Corpus Christi who are fighting the liquid natural gas that was allowed in a lot of the legislation that's been passed, and it's going to add 190 tons of CO2 carbon emissions into the air for the Gulf Coast, and that's really going to affect people in Texas and Louisiana. Yeah, I see your face is astounded.
I'm too expressive. I need to re-up my Botox. Sorry.
And like hearing about that and thinking like, why isn't anybody talking about that? And there are real communities that are having to deal with that. There was a train derailment there, carrying that very, very toxic gas. And you know, the fact that we're thinking about the women who are organizing their communities just to get away from it, but then also this is our home, we're resilient, showing the grit to fight these huge communities and these huge businesses down there. There's a ton of content, guys. I think there's places for us to tell these stories in ways that help people understand that, again, it's not a distant challenge, it's not one far away, and it really does resonate across like so many different entry points of the way we're connected in our communities.
Honestly, Sandra, thank you. I love how there are always themes of connectedness about almost like there's like a theme of like a chain reaction in individual actions to larger actions taken on a governmental scale, a corporate scale, but there's always that theme of connectedness, and it is important for us, for me as an individual who consumes things, to think about the connectedness and the chain reaction of climate, and the role it plays and everything. But this was an absolute blast, and thank you all so much for spending your afternoon/evening here. And thank you all for also listening, dealing with my rambling. We have 50 seconds left, and I think I will call Rolly back out. But this has been an absolute blast. My name is Neme Ndolo, and thank you all again, and thank you.